Michael, thank you so much for being with us today as we work on our project to record oral interviews on the revitalization of Lowell in the 1970s and 80s, but also how those questions and decisions have still had impact on the city up to the present. So the interviews that we're doing will be part of a set of interviews available through the Center for Lowell History, and they will be accompanied by photographs and other ephemera that help to put together this really important period in the city's history. So to start us off, maybe you can tell us something about your own background growing up in the city, what the city was like when you grew up, what it was like to get around, what the buildings were like. And no need to sugarcoat, because we've already heard from other people we've interviewed that it could be a little rough around the edges, but how that can help set the scene for the changes that then did occur from 1970 on.
Well, first, it's my pleasure. I appreciated Chancellor Moloney's call and your involvement, Marie, and I'm truly honored to be part of this. And people say that, but I really am, because I know what a great job Jackie did as Chancellor, and I have such great respect for the university. I also have enormous respect for the probably literally hundreds of folks in this community who deserve to be interviewed about it over the last 40 years, and I'm humbled by that as well to be asked, because I know personally how many folks in education and healthcare and the arts and social services have given so much of their time and energy and advice and financial resources. So I truly am very pleased to be here.
Great.
Let me give you a little bit about myself. Unlike a lot of the folks who came here from various countries throughout the world in the last 30 years, my family's been here since the 1850s. And the Gallaghers, the Gilligans, the Grants, interestingly, they came from different places in Ireland and Scotland, but they came at the same time. So the conditions must have been really bad at that time. They came here virtually penniless, part of the American story. They held blue-collar jobs for the most part. My grandfathers were probably the ones I knew the best after my parents, obviously. My grandfather on the Gallagher side was a bit of an entrepreneur. He was born and raised in the heart of the acre in Lowell, over in Sargent Street, literally almost the heart of the acre. And he started a grocery store on Broadway, Gallagher's grocery store.
Oh, wow.
And my grandfather on the other side, William Gilligan, went to law school, didn't practice, but got involved in politics, and ultimately was FDR's point person for the WPA effort in this area.
That's great.
And my mother grew up remembering lines of folks outside their home on Middlesex Street looking for work in some form or another. He then went on to become the Tommy McKay or Jim O'Donnell of the day. He was the Lowell Memorial Auditorium manager for a period of time. And then he worked at UMass Lowell.
I did not know that.
Yeah, in the athletic department, he worked at UMass Lowell in his semi-retirement. It all comes full circle.
That's
Lowell.
We like to say all roads lead to Lowell.
Yeah.
So that's my lineage. My mother was a elementary school teacher at the Oakland School and then the LeBlanc School for 30 years. My father was a draftsman at Raytheon and an entertainer of sorts. They came from humble roots and they made a modest living, and so I learned early on that hard work was the most important ethic. So I grew up in Lowell between Fort Hill and Shed Parks.
Okay.
And on one side was Roger Street and the other side was Fort Hill. And that was my whole world. I was thinking in response to this question, what did I know about Lowell? Almost nothing. Because I played ball at Fort Hill and then at Shed. I went to the Oakland School, which was a stone's throw from Shed. I walked across Fort Hill Park to get to the Moody School for 7th and 8th grade. That was my whole world. Other than going down to the Giant store or to Burke's, being dragged there by my mother around Christmas time, or going to, a little bit later, to the Rialto or the Strand to watch a movie, or going to a dental or a doctor's appointment. I knew almost nothing about Lowell. And then I went to a Jesuit school in Concord called Xavier. And I went there because my mother went to St. Patrick's, was a very religious person, then went to Emmanuel. And a friend of her from Emmanuel had a son going to Xavier. So even though all my friends went to Lowell High, and I desperately wanted, and I lobbied extensively to go to Lowell High, I ended up at this Jesuit school in Concord. And so for the next 4 years, I was bused down there. Then I went to Holy Cross, I was at Mount St. James in Worcester. And then I went to Syracuse and then BC Law School. I was in New York and then Boston. The point I'm making is I didn't really know much of anything about Lowell until after practicing law in New York for 3 years for the Legal Aid Society in Suffolk County. I had my first child. My wife had our first child. And she and I both had deep roots in this area. All our parents and family had said, we're back here. And we said, let's come back to Lowell. And it was at that point in the early 1980s that I started actually looking around a little bit and saying, this is my hometown. One other point, when I played for Holy Cross soccer, we played Lowell Tech at one time in the early 70s, at the same place where they play soccer now. Much less nice, but still there at the time. I remember distinctly the bus ride coming up, and then the bus ride going back Central and Gorham Street. And I remember one or two of my teammates on the bus not being that complimentary about that section of Lowell. And I never forgot that. So when I returned in 1981 and then began getting more involved in the mid-'80s, I always kept that in the back of my mind. And I would love at some point to find the person that said that, because I can tell them, you want to know about Lowell? I'll tell you about Lowell.
Well, you've had a really important role in changing the city. And when you came back, you, I think, started with Dick Donahue, and you joined his law firm. And of course, Dick is part of this history that we're trying to collect. And tell us about what it was like working for Dick Donahue, or any war stories from those days.
The first I came back, I practiced criminal law, and Dick's law firm did relatively little criminal law, mostly civil law. At the time, he was representing Riddell football helmets. Riddell had just been sued because people were saying, did it protect me? You know, I got injured playing football, did it protect me? My first thing to do for Donahue to Donahue was to go to Chicago to a national convention of folks who represented Riddell. And Dick was the featured speaker. And I said, I know a little bit about Dick Donahue. I've always been impressed, but wow, he's a nationally known trial lawyer. And then as a trial lawyer myself, I went on to understudy him for a good number of years. The art of, and the heart of any trial is cross-examination. That's where you get at the truth. Dick Donahue was the best cross-examiner I've ever seen, and people acknowledge that. The best plaintiffs' lawyers acknowledge that. I'm talking about Massachusetts. We practiced in 20 other states. He's the best I ever saw. Phenomenally gifted trial attorney and cross-examiner. But he wasn't preachy. So he wasn't the kind of person that, come on in, I'm going to tell you about this, I'm going to tell you about that. He knew I had been practicing law for 3 years, representing criminal defendants, often felonious criminal defendants, so not small cases. So he figured, you must know a little bit about what you're doing. Watch me. He didn't even say watch me, but that's what I did, I literally was his understudy. I would go and assist him at trials for 10 years. I learned so much about the practice of law, about how to be a professional, and then I segued to how to be a citizen. Dick Donahue's one of his few lessons, and he didn't really say it to me, but he would say it on occasion, is that this is a profession, not just a business. And a business is great, but as a profession, we have an obligation to give back. Hopefully, as lawyers, like bankers, or doctors, whoever, educators, as professionals, you recognize the importance of giving back. And so not only, Jackie, was he a great mentor and model for me of how to be a really good lawyer, but he was also a mentor and model, like his wife, Nancy, as to how to be a good citizen.
Do you remember any projects, even at that time, that they were getting involved with in the city?
Oh, sure. Dick, he was a driving force beyond, as Jackie knows, so many of the major nonprofits in the city and so many of the major efforts. He showed us how, in part, I believe, to renovate an historic structure when he did the Nesmith House. Just would never have happened, right, without Dick Donahue. He essentially started or helped start the Greater Lowell Community Foundation. And the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, I understand you're going to be interviewing Jay Linehan. What an amazing impact that's had on the life of this community. He was instrumental in making sure the MRT survived. And so we're now one of a handful of cities in all of New England that has a fully professional theater. There are over 1,000 communities in New England. We're one of just 7, I think. Why would this gateway city that's had ups and downs and has welcomed generations of immigrants and refugees, why would we be a place where you would see fully professional, first-rate theater attracting great directors and artists and actors? Why would we? It was in large part because of Dick and Nancy Donahue being so relentless. They weren't going to let this little theater die.
Well, you kind of took up the baton yourself as a businessman, and you definitely have led the way, much the way that Nancy and Dick did. So, you choose which one you want to go after first. I mean, you were very involved in some of the education reform initiatives that were a big part of the city and turning around the reputation of the city at the time. Do you want to talk about those? And then
I'd love to.
Maybe talk about those nonprofits.
Yes.
After.
It's a great question, and I actually have this because I have a quote from a syndicated columnist from the Boston Globe in 1986, and that was not long after Prince Charles came to Lowell. And this is what he said. Any American city down on its luck and discouraged about its New Year's prospects might take a look at the constantly evolving rebirth of this old New England mill town. Lowell is fast becoming not just an American, but an international model of a city risen from the grave.
Wow.
He went on to say this: the point of city building is not some achieved grandeur or dazzling economic statistics, but rather a process of shared, ongoing civic endeavor that ennobles the players. Lowell throbs with civic coalitions and complex public-private partnership arrangements, but the agenda is unfinished. Repair of more canals, greater development of downtown business, and maybe most importantly, a campaign for excellence in Lowell schools.
Great.
That was just the time
That
I
is
was
an
getting
unbelievable
involved. Isn't
quote.
it apt?
Yeah.
You could say that today.
You
so-
actually could, and Lowell still throbs with those partnerships, but it was around that time that I went to my first PTO meeting. And my son was a kindergartner at the LeBlanc, then the LeBlanc school. It was the Oakland school where my mother taught. And I was sitting at my first PTO meeting, and someone behind me, when the question arose, who would like to be the president of the PTO, pushed my arm up. Literally pushed my arm up, because I thought, I don't have the time to do this, I'm working for Dick, and so on. So by default, I became the PTO president. And I said, hey, my parents were all about education. The one thing they wanted to do was us to get educated. I went to 3 Jesuit schools, and so I learned the importance of educating the whole person and social consciousness and giving back and doing stuff for the common good. I'd be a chump if I didn't follow those trainings. And so I said to myself, let me do this. We're going to gather a few of the folks who used to be involved in the PTO, and I'm going to tell them politely, we're going to stop just doing turkey raffles. We're going to be more involved. And because I felt strongly that parents had to be involved, and they could bring resources and other things to bear. And so I developed with them a program that consisted of, for example, a read-aloud program where parents would come into the school, a speakers bureau where you'd bring in third parties to talk to the kids, not just the teachers, a public speaking program, because as lawyers, hopefully that's something we could do fairly well, and an effort to develop a constitution of this for the school so that the kids could understand what our founders went through. So I wrote this up, sent it out to all the parents, had no idea how it would be. No one got back to me. I'm saying, oh, I'm sinking. I went to my second PTO meeting, and who's sitting in the front row? but Brian Martin, who was the mayor of the city at the time, and Paul Tsongas, a U.S. senator, is sitting in my little PTO meeting. And I said to myself, this PTO is going to be a pretty cool thing.
You really didn't expect to see them?
No.
You had no idea
I had no idea.
the senator was
I had no idea that he in the front row. So I started sweating and so on. But it gave me reason to believe that this is a community which is different from a lot. Where else would you get a U.S. senator sitting in the front row and a mayor?
Right.
So things didn't go quite as planned because the administration was still a little bit, I want to say, mired in the old way of doing things. Not that that was bad, but parents had their place. So I moved my child to the Riley School, where Frank Moriarty, the principal there, was much more receptive to it. We started a community schools process. I went to Dick and I said, can we start a speakers program and a public speaking program and a speakers bureau and a constitution committee? He said, absolutely. No problem at all. Despite the fact that I'm supposed to be billing hours, he said, let's do it.
Yeah.
So we became, because of his largesse, the first law firm in the state to develop a school business partnership with an elementary school that involved more than money. Because typically, here's $1,000. But this was really not about money. It was about people being there and helping out. At that time, and this is segueing to how I got involved in those issues, there started to be an influx of Southeast Asians into the community. And you may have heard from others that they were being taught in closets, literally, in a couple of downtown schools. In other words, it was a very segregated way of doing it at the time. So, being the president of a PTO, I became an automatic member of the Citywide Parent Council, which the university was instrumental in getting going. On the Citywide Parent Council, we tried to do the same thing. No more turkey raffles. Let's get involved in issues of substance. Let's get involved in desegregation. We were right in the middle of it because there were pro and there was con, and the Boston busing experience was still in people's minds.
Right.
We didn't want to do that, and because of folks like Jimmy Campbell, who was the manager around that time, and George Sapat-Saris, who was the project director for the schools, and the Citywide Parent Council got very involved. And one of my best memories from that time was gathering literally 1,000 postcards from parents and others in the community and going to the city councilors in the city and saying, please, please float the bond that allows us to build the new schools. Because of our DSEG program, we were able to get 90% funding for the new schools. Wow. In 1969, and I'll tie this up, the Harvard Center for Field Studies did a study of Lowell's public schools and said half of the schools should be abandoned right now. There was one school that went back to the Polk administration, and Francis K. Polk was president in 1844 to 1848. They were ancient.
Yeah.
And so to be able to desegregate our schools without bloodshed through the controlled choice process, to be able ultimately to invest $131 million into 14 new schools, the most ambitious such project in the history of the Commonwealth. There had been nothing to compare to that. All of a sudden, the Citywide Parent Council was smack in the middle of things. At the same time, there was a move to a different superintendent. We were starting the information age. We got to get out of the past a little bit. Let's do it. And Fred Faust and I started a group called the Community Alliance for School Excellence, which was a little revolutionary at the time. And so that's where we started getting involved in politics, and we still have the scars, Fred does and I have, to prove it, because we were taking on kind of an entrenched group of folks. And from there I went on to the Commission on the Common Core of Learning, which formed a Common Core, which was the basis for the curriculum frameworks and the MCAS testing. Joined the school committee at Paul Tsongas's importuning, and no one could turn down Paul at the time.
We're getting that message pretty consistently.
Eileen Donahue was the same.
So you would say the same thing,
and a bunch of folks who just had to do it, and got involved in.
He kind of put your hand up.
Yeah, exactly. He put it up.
Who's running?
Yeah, and over 2 years we got involved in how are we going to change the face of education in the city. You know, you're an upstart in your 30s.
Yeah.
You don't see the problems, and so we started increased proficiency writing plans and increased proficiency reading plans in all the schools. We had school improvement plans in every school in the city, full-day kindergartens, public preschool, charter schools we explored, character education, critical thinking education. I wanted to try to do as much as I could in a short time because I knew I was on a short leash. I had 3 young boys. I was coaching a couple of teams. Dick was leaving to go be the president of Nike Shoe.
Right.
I became the head of the trial department, civil
Wow.
trial department at the firm. I knew my days as an elected official were numbered. And so, but I had the chance in those 10 years to be part of what I felt to be a resurgence, a total transformation of the system. The next step, and I'm sorry for running with this a little bit, but the next step was in the mid-90s, the big hue and cry was youth crime and violence. You may remember Clinton was a big part of his plan, and it was happening in Lowell.
Yeah.
And so I tried to get away from public service, but I got reeled back in, started the Youth Commission, which led to the Healthy Summer Program, which led to the Community Schools Program. And the idea behind those was, it's great to have new schools, and it's great to have good education from 8 o'clock till 2 o'clock.
Right.
What do kids do after hours, on weekends, and during the summer? So those programs sought to provide, to fill the gap and to enable young people to be involved in productive activities as an antidote to unproductive activities. Much of the rest of the 90s, I was involved with that. So for those 15 years, education was, as Albert Schweitzer said, it was an adventure for the soul. I never intended to do it,
Yeah.
but you get immersed in it, and you
Yeah.
kind of get dragged along by good people like Paul and others who almost, not embarrass you, but you got to make sure you do it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
those folks are doing such good work at so many levels. At the
Right.
university, Marty at the university, and then you at the university. You see people doing such good work, you have to step up to the plate and do something.
Well, you certainly did, and I think it was great hearing about the transformation of education
Yeah, yes.
in the city of Lowell. We haven't really covered, I think there was a
Right.
Lowell model for
The
education.
Lowell, and the university was intimately involved in all that. They developed, Don Pearson was
Pearson.
another mentor
Oh,
of mine.
yes,
Yeah.
right, right.
Don was the dean of the School of Education. Mary Bacigalupo,
Yeah.
one of my favorite. I gave the
This is
eulogy
great.
at her funeral. Her park is right across the street. She was a major player in the Center for Field Studies. They were all about how can we help the public schools.
Yeah.
Were it not for the university, that transformation would not, and George Sapatsaris would have said that. They started their own elementary school, the demonstration school. They started something called the Leadership Academy, which I participated in as a member of the citywide camp, where they brought all the principals together and experts from the School of Education spoke to them about how to be a good principal. They did professional development training. They did a whole number of things which advanced the ball for education from the mid. They were really ahead of the curve. And folks like myself and others kind of took direction from them a little bit into where to go, because we weren't experts in education. Mary was, Don was, Judy Boccia was, a number of folks like that were, and we followed their lead.
Right, but it could not have happened without the political backbone that you, frankly, and others showed. Having a university come in and tell a school system how to run itself usually isn't that welcome, but
Right.
when it's driven by local residents, business people, and I love the way you describe that, because part of the communication that we're trying to share with folks is that certain DNA that Lowell has.
Right.
And it isn't just one person. There
Right.
was this whole community of people joined together
Right.
and rowing right in the same direction. So
Yeah.
that was an excellent overview, and
Right.
it's something we haven't
Thank you.
covered yet.
Right, no,
so.
exactly, on education, because we haven't had that piece yet.
Yeah.
So
This,
perfect.
the whole controversy about where the high school was going to go?
Yes,
The high school is now the most ambitious public high school project in the history of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I just happened to, again, get directly into Nikki Songa said, you're going to have to chair this. It wasn't me, it was Nikki who said, and the reason I mention it is that I tell people that in order to get that issue as a referendum, we had to get 12,000 signatures. Imagine in a city of our size, relatively getting 12,000 signatures for that. But there was such a devoted group of people. I probably got 20 of them. Other people got 11,000, whatever. They went around the city for months to get those signatures for one reason, because they recognized the importance of keeping Lowell central so that folks from all over the city could maybe walk there if they couldn't, so that they'd have access to all of the services in the area to complement what they have. So that's an example, as you say, Jackie, of literally hundreds of folks getting together from all parts of the city to make that happen, and it never would have. You know, there's an expression by Oliver Wendell Holmes, and it goes, you must share the action and passion of your time, or run the risk of never having lived. And that was the action and passion of that time. To me, we had a lot of great people like Fred and Peter Rosseller and Steve Jonkus and Eileen Donahue and Brian Martin, and people are going to be mad because I left them out, who were getting involved in the arena and the ballpark and so on. And we needed folks to also remember, as this article said, we need a campaign for excellence in Lowell schools. And a lot of people came to the fore and did it, but I felt that I was sharing the action and passion of my time by getting involved in that issue.
So, and I think similarly to what Dick Donahue did and what we're trying to focus, because this will be, the home for this will be in the Donahue Ethics Center of the archive. And part of the message to the next generation, honestly, is that you can do well and do good. And you chose to take a very successful law practice. A lot of people would have moved this outside the city, but not only did you choose to locate and house your practice here in the city, you also chose to preserve some historic buildings in doing so. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what went into your thinking about that.
That's a very good question. That's actually exactly true. We were at the Boot Mill. Jackie knows that. She was there, and Marie, it's over on the river. You know where the Boot Mill is. And
she may have written a book on it.
Okay, you certainly know the Boot Mill. But we started with 2,500 square feet, went to 5,000, went to 10,000. So we were comfortable there. But we kept getting this push. We need to be more involved in the city. And we were growing and growing and growing. Went up to 30 people. I'm saying we're now 10,000 square feet. We're a little bit too big. Where are we going to go? And as you said, Jackie, there was a lot of temptation to go out on the connector or on Route 3, somewhere where people would have much easier access. But Rich Kavanaugh, who was my partner, and I said there's no way we're moving out of Lowell. As a matter of fact, we're going to get closer to the heart of Lowell. One of the things that I learned once I finally came back to the city was how, I don't want to say unique, but rare it was to have a place like this in the downtown where you can walk down a Middle Street and see building after building that was authentically restored and has been around for, where else can you do that other than Boston and maybe Sturbridge Village or something like that? You really can't. And so I said, if there's a way we could find, and Rich, if we can find an historic building, which was difficult to do because a lot of folks had bought them up, and then restore it and be stewards of that building, because we knew that we'd be there for only so long, that would be really cool. I happened to be the chair of the revolving museum at the time. Jerry Beck decided to go elsewhere. He and his wife split up. They owned this building, they lived here, and so this opened up. And we jumped at it, and within 2 months we renovated the whole place, because we had a lease over here, we had to pay the mortgage here, and we were sweating it. And we had a great architect and builder and designer, and their charge was be authentic as possible. Make sure even the colors replicate what was used in the 1850s, because this building was built in 1859, and we'll be good stewards. The other thing we did, Marie, was there's a deck right behind us.
Okay.
And we committed, if we're going to be stewards, we need this to be a gathering place. And so we committed to making this as a if people wanted to come, to sell the city and to say good things about the city, but also to bring people together. Okay. So we probably had close to 70 gatherings here. And that a lot of political gatherings for governor, we're having the attorney general in a couple of weeks, but importantly, for mental health, for entrepreneurial efforts, for education, for the arts. We I don't want to say mandate, but we strongly encourage all of our lawyers to be on at least one board, and most of them are from out of town. Mm-hmm. And if your board wants to meet somewhere, bring them here. If your board wants to have an outing during the summer, please. It's good business, as you say, Jackie, because if you look at one of our events and then if there's 100 people there, I can probably say that 75 are clients of the firm. Mm-hmm. If you're good to folks, people will be good to you. And we didn't do it for that purpose, but we began to say, hey, this artist is coming to us. This business person is coming to us. So it's worked out really well. But this place has become sort of a gathering place in the downtown for what we hope are forward-looking efforts. But we're so glad to be in this location. And as I was saying before our interview, I can't tell you how many lawyers from out of town that come in for a deposition or an expert in a case or a deponent in a case who end up strolling down Middle Street and coming into this building and they say, wow, cobblestone streets, great old brick buildings, little placards attesting to the history of this building, that. Yeah. This is a really cool place. Yeah. And that's without being prompted or spun or anything. And I used to say that when I was not semi-retired to the staff all the time. Please remind people, get people, they used to, believe it or not, well, can't you come into Boston for deposition? It's my deposition. You guys are coming to Lowell. I'm not, I have to go all the way up to Lowell. It's 20 minutes away at 11 o'clock.
Right.
And once they came here, they actually, by and large, had no problem coming back because they really enjoyed the history of the place.
That's great, and you definitely are the convener.
Thank you.
If anybody's running for any office, or if you have any cause, you want Attorney Gallagher here to definitely spearhead something, because everyone will show up for you, Michael, and it's because you've invested so much in others. So I know, Marie, you'd probably like to ask them some questions about the building and...
Well, we had a lovely tour, and we're going to get more materials for our interview that will intersperse some of those fabulous photos that you showed us. Do you also own the small garden that's outside? Yes. That's also a nice amenity just on the street.
We live next door.
Okay.
We were living, you'll get a kick out of this, we were living in a Lowell Tech frat house. A Lowell Tech frat house on Waverly Ave, but still between the two parks. Yeah. When we bought this building, this space became available. It was a display space.
Right. Okay.
Where the gas company brought people in to look at what were then newfangled gas appliances.
Right.
It's 950 square feet. The frat house was 10,000 square feet, 4 floors. We were going to have to somehow constrict a 10,000 square foot old frat house into 950 square feet.
That's downsizing.
That is really downsizing. And nothing had been done in there for 50 years. Wow. So it had to be totally studs to studs, wall to ceiling, totally redone. Had a great team. Nick Saris, whom you probably know, is a great developer and very skilled artisan. Jay Mason was our architect, and Kathleen Stewart, great designer, who used to have a place right up the street. They came together. I just said, please make it, a place that we could sell for folks thinking about moving to the downtown. Because we were trying to get people to come and live in the downtown. And purely because of their expertise, it ended up in the front page of Merrimack Valley Magazine. Yep. And the article was entitled Return to Downtown Living. Right. And so one of the main goals was to develop a space, and it's my wife's garden, it's all her handiwork. Thank you. We've had enough people there, and whether people have decided to come to the downtown or not as a result, I have no idea. But we like to think that we were part of the pioneers coming into the downtown.
You sure have, and you've been championed. And when we were walking through the lobby, there was a beautiful picture of the Lowell Folk Festival. I know you and your wife have been big champions of the Lowell Folk Festival.
Yes.
Maybe say a few words about
Yeah,
your involvement with that.
At Kendall Wallace, again, we get knuckled by, we have a bunch of puppeteers, and I mean this in a very good way. Jackie's a puppeteer in a very complimentary way.
Yeah.
They see who can help out, and they motivate people to do it. And I get motivated by Jackie, I've been motivated by Marty Meehan. In this respect, I was certainly motivated by George Duncan. George has been a huge buyer of arts and supporter of the arts, and over at the Boot Mill, we had a half mile of empty walls. And so George did it, and we said, let's do it ourselves. And we went to Weston Avenue and to others and found out how to do it. And the next thing you know, we're convening gatherings of artists and others. This is how you might go about buying art. If we can do it, anyone can do it. And we had artists come by and explain their art to potential buyers and so on. We then got Kendall Wallace got us involved in the folk festival, Dick Howe and Rich Kavanaugh and myself. And one of the things that the Costello family owned at the time was an auto dealership, as you may recall. And they made available a car to raffle off. So in the early days of the folk festival, Dick and Rich and I were hawking in the car, come get your car ticket here, for hours every day. What's Gallagher doing over there, or how, or so on, for a number of years. We were involved in that respect. But that gradually got us involved more in the arts, which, as you know, we're very proud about in this city. It's another example. How can we do a theater? How can we have so much art in this? Right. Weston Avenue is the largest conclave of artists in the country. You know, why is that in Lowell? Yeah. It's because of folks and the university and others who say it's going to happen in Lowell. Let me just give you a final example of this that I think is the best example, and that's over at the health center. Lowell Community Health Center at one time was a bunch of little satellites with vermin around and, you know, boxes piled up and so on. I don't mean that too literally, but they weren't the best places. Somehow Dorcas Sato, who was the CEO, came up with a plan to renovate a 150-year-old mill and make it into a state-of-the-art, beautiful 21st century health center. How the heck are you going to do that? Morris Smith was the development person at the time. They corralled me and others, and I said, it'll take a miracle to do that.
It was an abandoned mill.
Abandoned mill, with water coming
nothing had been in there for a long time.
And that literally had vermin running around it was horrible, and I really did think it would take a miracle to do it. Well, they were miracle workers, and I ended up as the co-chair of the capital campaign. After we raised $5 million, I had people were going different ways across the street when I asked them, you know, having asked them for money so many times. So Dorcas said, "Can you stick around a little bit, Dorcas? We'd love it if you could do that." And somehow it occurred to me, let me come up with a plan that's sure to fail, and then she'll get rid of me. And so at the time we had invited all these artists into Lowell. What if we married the artistic world with the health world? How would you do that? Well, let's get artists to respond to a call to generate art that's fit for a health center. Let's put that art on a website where folks can go and buy the art, but instead of hanging it on your living room, it's going to be hung at the health center.
Oh, right.
Half the money goes to the artist, half the money goes to the health center. I thought it was such a crazy idea that it would never work.
It was genius.
And people I ran it by initially said, that's a crazy idea. Yeah. But to me, and I say this totally honestly, I was thinking it's probably not going to work, and then I'll have my segue away from having to raise more dough, because people were tired of hearing from me. Strangely enough, and totally unlikely in my view, it worked really well. 500 pieces of art were put on the website after 150 artists developed them. There are now close to 250 pieces of art at the health center. It is one of the largest art galleries west of Boston. Yeah. And the beauty of it, and the reason I mentioned it, is because we've all been about getting folks to give back. The Medici during the Renaissance had plenty of dough. I'm going to patronize it. But can't we get folks to patronize the arts, education, etc., who don't have a lot of dough.
Right.
This was a way for it to happen, because the Smith family can get together, buy a $250 piece of art. Each person in the family gives $50.
Right.
And now it's hanging on the wall saying donated by the Smith family in memory of their mother.
Right.
To me, that was a good example of what Lowell can do.
Right.
There were, I think, 1,800 givers
Right.
to that
Right.
campaign.
Right.
The only way it happened was employees gave money as well.
Right.
That is Lowell contributing
Right.
to healthcare and ultimately contributing to the arts, so that now that facility caters to almost half the population of Lowell, and they go into a welcoming place with beautiful pieces of art on the walls. And I can't tell you how many employees, doctors, nurses, children, patients have remarked on how much they enjoy seeing the art on the walls. That's Lowell. That's Lowell.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Like you said, it's the DNA in the people that live here, that no matter if it's small or large, that they somehow want to be involved and connected to their community. So that's perfect.
It motivates the rest of us.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know,
It does.
and when you have folks like Jackie and George Duncan and the O'Connors and the O'Donnells and the O'Donohues, you know, you can name 40 different, maybe not 40, but 20 or 30 different folks who inspired the rest of us and motivated the rest of us to get involved. I always felt like I was just awaiting orders. Let me march.
That's hardly true.
I will march in time. That's my job.
That's hardly true. You are definitely one of the, a driving force in the city, and
Thank you.
for everything that you have done to make the city what it is.
Absolutely.
And we just, that was a perfect segue, actually, to our last question. If you were addressing the next generation, we have one of them right here videotaping today, why is it important to give back? Or, there is so much cynicism and skeptics out there
Yeah.
today about, can you do well and do good is important to do. What would you say to the next generation?
Well, first they'd probably say, who is this white-haired guy? He's, it must be ancient. But if I could get through to, younger folks, and I have 3 boys who are at various ages, I go back to my Jesuit training, and that was when I was at first year at Xavier. I was horrible in sciences, so I ended up in the classics. Imagine a guy from the Moody School, never took a language, all of a sudden I'm taking 7 years of Latin and 8 years of Greek. But I learned about the concept, and I don't want to sound too highfalutin, but it was ingrained in me, of polis, which is the Greek concept of a city-state, where things are done for the common good. We have great architects and great leaders and so on in the community, great business types, but they're all working for the common good. And then you segue to the Roman world, where the concept of civitas, citizenship, and those who were citizens had an obligation to give back. It was a responsibility to give back. It wasn't just a charitable thing to do, it was a responsibility. I would say to young people today, you are the best generation. You are the most learned, you are the least misogynistic, you are the most open-minded, you are the most involved generation in American history. I truly believe. You are the most technologically sophisticated. In so many ways, you are the best generation. But you got a lot of challenges. You have a lot of challenges, not the least of which is climate change. And so we need you to step up to the plate. That doesn't mean you got to do everything yourself. But if your fellow citizens, the fellow folks in your generation get together and you do this and you do that and I contribute in this way, the things you can do are truly miraculous. I found that out the hard way in this city, that people can cause miracles. I wasn't the one saying, this is going to happen. I was listening to others say, we can do that in Lowell. Nancy Donahue in 1979, we can have a fully professional theater in Lowell. Dorcas Griggs saying we could have we could turn a 150-year-old mill into a beautiful new health center. They believed in miracles, and Lowell has always believed in miracles. And young people can create miracles. That's what I would say.
All right.
Very inspiring. Perfect way to wrap up. Really appreciate you participating in this. I know that you will be an inspiration for generations to
Thank
come.
you.
Thank you.
My
Thank
pleasure. Thank you both. for
Thank
thinking
you.
of it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Nice to see you.